Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to a early update here on the severe weather forecast for the potential for significant severe weather outbreaks for the plains on both Sunday and as well Tuesday, as we have a smaller threat on Monday. So we're watching out for a multi-day severe weather event here. Obviously, the main day I'd say is most likely Tuesday, but we're seeing a huge trend for Sunday, obviously, which is tomorrow. And let's just say that we have a lot of interesting updates here. We're going to get into really great depth within for tomorrow's risk as the ARRR and NAM are obviously way into range. And then, of course, we're going to be looking a little bit longer range for day 4, which is obviously going to be Tuesday. So we have a lot of information here on the overall setup, timing, and where we can see the worst and as well what will be the worst impacts, whether it's tornadoes, hail, or winds, etc. So we're going through all of that. So if you guys are in the plains, I would recommend you guys watch this video. And if you have any friends or family in the plains, specifically Texas, Oklahoma, or Kansas, I recommend you guys share this video so they can get information on this. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So now, obviously, since Sunday is tomorrow, we do have the probability for both or all three hail, wind, and tornadoes, and not just the overall probability outlook or the probabilistic outlook. So we actually have a lot more information. And obviously, we now have convective information with cams, etc. So we're obviously looking at a pretty good setup, and we're going to get a lot more information, obviously, as we continue throughout today. So here's the latest look at the 60 outlook on from the SPC. And obviously, they have expanded this enhanced a little bit further north, closer towards the Kansas border as well. It actually has pushed as well further eastward, so now it's deep in in the heart of the OKC and Norman Metro, as well has expanded a little further west as well. Well, actually, it's expanded west into OKC Metro. Now it's expanded a little bit east, closer to the Arkansas border. So this enhanced force has obviously expanded a lot. Because overall there's been a lot of massive uptrend since really yesterday morning, including specifically I'd say the NAM and the ARRR going absolutely mental for this event here, and I'm going to get a little bit great into depth and what I mean by that. But here's the enhanced risk, including 3.3 million people, including Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Norman, Lawton, and Broken Arrow. So you hear these three big cities, Tulsa, Norman, and Oklahoma City. Those are some pretty big cities here, and that's why this threat or this event's going to be quite concerning, considering it's going to be going through a really, really populated area. But this second season looks really interesting, if I say to say the least. As well as a slight risk has pushed now into Kansas and Missouri and deeper into Arkansas, including around 9 million people, as it includes the DFW area, Arlington, Plano, and Garland, as well as marginal. We actually have a marginal in the Midwest, but right now the main marginal is going to be stretching from basically Springfield, Missouri, and Jefferson City, Missouri, all the way down towards Austin and College Station. As well, tornado probability, like I predicted, is a 10% non-significant risk and not hatched. Obviously, I think this would be more verified for a 10 non-sig than a 10 sig risk, and I actually do agree with this completely. And I actually was talking about like yesterday and even to Thursday how this would most likely be verified as a 10 non-sig. It's exactly what they issued. As well, we do have a pretty widespread of 5% chance. It's going to be a pretty significant and widespread event considering it's the second season. Typically in the second season, these events would be very scattered, or not scattered, sorry, would be very kind of specifically centered across a small area, and obviously, just centered across a small area within a small radius. But this is a pretty widespread event as well, watching out for multi-severe weather threats, of course, including day 2, day 3, into day 4. So 10% includes around 3 million people, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Norman, Lawton, and Broken Arrow. So again, the main area I'm watching out for is tornadoes actually occurring, in my opinion, is going to be specifically just east of the OKC Metro. I'm actually watching out for this whole area for tornadoes. I'm looking at some really favorable conditions within the warm sector. Actually, I'm seeing the best part of the warm sector right here, because obviously right along, like directly on the dry line, it's going to be more surface-based and as well more of linear and elevated. Sorry, not surface based. It's going to be more elevated based and going to be more of a huge hail threat and wind threat towards the OKC Metro. But once we get towards, obviously, once these storms start to go deeper into the warm sector and along the warm front across southeast Oklahoma, that's where things get very interesting, and that's where I think they will become pretty significant supercells and surface-based supercells. So I'm gonna watch out for that main tornado threat near, kind of near Durant, Oklahoma, there north of the Texas border, if you guys know what I mean. And the 5%, of course, including DFW, obviously including Arlington, Plano, and Garland, as well makes its way into areas just outside Joplin, Missouri, just outside this, kind of just slightly into southeast Kansas and to portions of western Arkansas. And then we have two areas of 2%, one in the Midwest, and obviously the main one right now across the Ozarks and the Plains, including Shreveport, Louisiana, Springfield, Missouri, Waco, Texas, Tyler, Texas, and of course up there near Duluth, Minnesota. It is actually a 30 non-sig, which I'm pretty surprised. I would have thought this would have been a verify or at least a 30 sig for day 2. Very surprised that it's just a 30 non-sig, but I wouldn't doubt they actually upgrade towards a 30 sig by most likely later today. Uh, Based on the overall huge uptrend on this little jet and extreme trough strength, I mean, we're looking at some pretty extreme uptrending within this trough itself. Specifically, I'd say from the HRR and the NAM. The GFS is staying pretty similar compared to a yesterday, but the 12Z is running right now. So I'll actually see the 12Z for the first time when you guys see it for the first time as well. So as of now, the 60 GFS was pretty similar towards the 0Z, and the 0Z was pretty similar to the 18Z, so nothing too crazy with the GFS, but the NAM and the HRR are going pretty crazy. So 30 sig right now, though, including obviously the 3.3 million people, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and that general region across eastern and central Oklahoma to northern Texas, and of course the 15% a little bit more widespread. And the hail is at 30%, and obviously it's going to be a massive hail, but the main hail threat, in my opinion, is going to be basically just along the dry line. We're going to be seeing those strong elevated base supercells. Going to be some pretty big, some pretty actually I'd say good lapse rates in the mid levels on the 500 millibars, 700 millibars. Some pretty good lapse rates across central Oklahoma. So really watching out for some potential for some pretty large hailstones. I would not doubt we see some frequent significant reports of over 2-inch diameter hail. Stones, of course, 3.3 million, and then the 15% includes around 9 million, and then the 5% includes around 7 million. So we're seeing, of course, this overall event kind of specifically centered across just really mainly Oklahoma, with obviously a portion of northeast Texas. But yeah, looking really significant for day 2. So here to look now at Monday, and Monday actually went a slight risk, like I predicted as well. We're gonna be seeing a potential QLCS event here in a overall kind of a low cape event with a high shear environment. So we're still going to be seeing that strong little jet, but there is going to be as well very little cape, as well very little overall. Overall, just it's not going to be as favorable. Obviously, it's going to be more of a low energy event, but a high sheared event. So going to be just seeing a linear mode here in surface based events. Not going to be thinking too crazy. Obviously, the 50% is going to be just basically for the wind. Hail and tornadoes are very unlikely. I'd say maybe a 2% tornado risk once we get towards day 2 for this event on Monday, but it's going to mainly be I'd say it's going to be a pretty large QLC event and a pretty overall significant linear mode. So going to be watching out for the Midwest for some pretty significant wind events or wind reports. And I mean, it's not going to be too shabby. I mean, it's definitely still going to be part of that multi-day and connecting kind of Sunday to Tuesday with that multi-day risk here. So gonna definitely still watch out for this potential Monday. Should still be monitored, but nothing too crazy compared to the rest of the days. And of course, here's a look now at day 4. And actually, day 4 has actually shifted pretty far west as a result of the overall change in little change in location of this little jet actually ejecting a little further kind of this way, so it's going to really allow for this chance for some more storms to even develop further into northwest Kansas as well and into southwestern Nebraska. So it's kind of doing a very weird looking shape. They're kind of bending back towards the west a little bit here. So going to really watch out for really western Oklahoma, the northeast Texas Panhandle, but obviously in the northwestern part of the state, western and central Kansas as well into even portions there of southern Nebraska. Going to watch out for a potential really significant wind event as well, a really significant tornado event. I'd say the main, since I guess the GFS mainly specifically, the big trend is going to be really for portions of western Oklahoma, directly south central, and portions of the northeast or more like northwest portion of Texas there, but on the northeast panhandle, gonna really watch out for potential for some pretty significant tornadoes as well. Watching out for a very significant wind event. I mean, this most likely does have potential to potentially become by day one a moderate risk. I'm actually very surprised based on the 30% or 30% not being issued as of now. However, I do get it since the GFS and European are still showing kind of pretty significant lack of moisture return as a result of this cold front. So I'd say the overall intensity overall of this event has kind of died on a little bit based on the of it being a multi-state outbreak. But I definitely say the confidence for Oklahoma remains quite high for a significant event, but obviously has expanded further south and northward, so it looks like maybe there is a chance for a new trend in favoring a more moisture return. But again, that cold front's going to be the big thing here. Most likely will allow for some pretty rapid upscale, so we're going to really watch out for a huge wind threat for sure, as well watching out for even a significant hail threat, but still monitoring that tornado threat very, very closely for day 4. So here's now let's go actually look at the latest HRRR here for just tomorrow. So here's a look now at let's actually go back for a second. So let's go. Let me move my screen a little bit. There we go. So this is a look now at basically 23Z. So there you see kind of these first discrete cells starting to develop there. Obviously, just along the dry line, it's going to be basically right here. There's the dry line. So you're going to be seeing those storms that develop there. Along the warm front, but obviously it's going to be very minimal at this point. The main threat's going to be towards really the evening hours by 0Z. That's when storms start to really form. There's going to be some pretty significant supercells here, but like I said, there's mainly going to be some really significant hail and wind threats. But obviously, once they cross into the main portion of the warm sector, which is just east of OKC, that's going to be the main area, the really main area to watch out for. For obviously Sunday, that's where I'm really watching out for the huge, basically try probability threat. But obviously at this point I'm going to start seeing these storms starting to convect kind of convect along the dry line, or just not directly along the dry line, but kind of close to the dry line, basically within that southerly flow. And then once we get towards 2Z, there you see you're going to be watching out first a potential embedded supercells that could very well be tornadic along portions of eastern and northeastern Oklahoma. But the main threat's going to be really watch out for once we get towards 4Z as we start to transition into that linear mode. And this squall, and watch out for some potential surface-based supercells embedded within this linear mode. And watch out for some tornadoes. I'm really watching out, like I said, for southeast Oklahoma. Really watching out kind of for this whole area, just basically directly east of OKC, as well. Watching out for northeast Texas. Kind of the whole area I'm going to really watch out for tornadoes. Obviously, OKC Metro is still under 10%. Like I said, for the main area, I'm basically watching out for basically near the Durant area and that general vicinity. But let's now look at what the NAM 3 or the NAM, just overall NAM wants to have. And the NAM obviously wants a very similar scenario. We kind of see these kind of elevated base supercells kind of forming directly along the line. And then obviously before transitioning into a squall, going to be watching out for some embedded supercells along southeast portion of Oklahoma. Let's not look at the NAM 3 kilometer though, because it's a little bit more detailed and a little bit more specific and not as smooth as a regular NAM. So let's now look at the NAM 3 kilometer though. So let's actually go back. So once we get towards around 0Z, there you start to see these storms starting to develop there across western Oklahoma. Going to be some pretty significant and large hail threats specifically just for those cells. Those first cells developing southwest Oklahoma are going to be some really large hail makers for sure. As we get towards 2Z, there you see these scattered discrete supercells going directly for the OKC Metro. Going to be seeing some really significant winds as well, very large hail with obviously a tornado threat. But as we get a little later now into around 4 or 5Z, that's where the main tornado threat I say is going to really start to play out as we get a little bit deeper into the basically heart of the warm sector, and kind of just basically along that warm front. It's going to be seeing some really good amounts of instability as a significant amount of forcing as well. So definitely going to watch out for that. So let's now look at the overall now HRRR 500 millibar jet, and they are really showing a really huge uptrend since yesterday, to say the least. So here's now a look at basically 22Z. Look at that really significant, obviously negative tilted trough. Going to be seeing some really strong ejecting southerlies basically from the southwest. Going to bring some really high amounts of shear, a lot of mid-level support. Obviously it's going to be a pretty significant forcing mechanism. I'm going to be seeing around 90 knot level of jet basically. And as we get towards now around 0Z or 1Z, you're going to start seeing Again, there you see those kind of those wind bars, things some really significant shear, specifically across portions of the southwestern or across the southwestern portions of this risk. But by the actually downtown area in central Oklahoma, going to be seeing around 70 knots or so at 500 millibar. And once we get towards 3Z, it's going to be very interesting here. By 3Z, that's when kind of the strongest part of this little jet's going to kind of make its way towards Oklahoma. Look at this really strong amount of shear now. It's starting to develop at 500 millibar, seeing it now over 80 knots. And then by 4Z and 5Z, look at this. This is the heart of this little jet. It's going to be directly pushed into some really strong negative tilt flow directly into, like I said, areas just east, or basically just east of the OKC metro. I mean, look at that. Can be seeing this is going to be as well in the middle of the warm sector. So going to be really kind of just dead on with these thermos, kind of meaning these kinematics. And that's going to be directly basically into east central Oklahoma, around 80 plus knots or so. And then, of course, I'm going to start to see that minor threat, the slight risk for obviously Monday. That's going to be more of that small linear potential QLCS mode. But nothing too crazy for that. Maybe a 2% tour. Let's look at the overall thermos. Like I said, the thermos are kind of really starting to match up with the kinematics, and they're kind of locking up. So definitely pretty concerning. By 21Z, seeing some really good thermals already. Seeing some dew points into the upper 60s and as well lower 70s, getting as high as 70 into 71 degree Fahrenheit dews. And that's very significant considering it's October, although it's still the south central. This is still really, really uncommon to see moisture return ejecting so far northward. Typically, you kind of see this moisture return at this point of year kind of go towards the southeast into Dixie, with obviously this is typically very common during the tropical season. But ejecting into like a May type pattern, this is very, very uncommon. But let's now go back. Actually, I actually went over it. There we go. So this is now by 0Z and 3Z. Look at 0Z starting to see some really, really good dews here and really good thermos, 70 degree. And there you see that very intense dry line, basically just in place across the south here. So there's going to be that main dry line, and obviously it's going to start to push its way towards the east as we go throughout the day. But let me actually now get you guys some soundings here. So actually, the reason why I actually had to adjust my screen here so I can look at soundings, since pivotal weather, the soundings are obviously bigger than the actual like screen for the overall model screen. So let's actually then look at the overall sounding. So I want to look at a sounding here, basically kind of just basically I say south of OKC. That's where we're seeing some really, really good thermos there, just really along portions of that dry. And so again, like I said, at this point, it's mainly going to be pretty large and significant wind and hail threat. I'm not sure why it's still doing that. Let me there we go. There we go. So like I said, it's going to be mainly, it's going to be 0Z, kind of near OKC. It's going to be mainly more of a hail and wind threat rather than a tornado threat. So we're going to be looking at some more soundings, basically specifically towards the lapse rate. So it's seeing some pretty decent lapse rates in the mid-level, 7.7 Celsius, as well as seeing some pretty good Kate 2000, almost 2100. I mean, this is definitely a decent sounding for hail and wind. I mean, look at this shear getting up to around 80 knots at around 8 kilometers. So definitely some really significant shear. You can kind of tell, seeing some really significant shear as we get kind of past really 400 millibars. We're seeing some really intense shear, as well as some pretty intense veering as you get towards basically from 1,000 to 700 millibars. Seeing some pretty decent, veering. You can tell we're seeing some really good veering based on this there. Seeing a ton of reds, basically signifying we are seeing a ton of veering. And again, we do have a tornado potential hazard, but again, you never want to look at the possible hazard because possible hazards are always very, very misleading here. I wonder if I can actually adjust my screen here a little bit more. So I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit like that. There we go. So the best time for, like I say, tornado is going to be around 3Z, and that's going to be obviously once it gets basically just towards the south of, or basically to the east of OKC. This is, we're going to be seeing the better portion of this warm sector again. This is going to be the main part of this warm sector, basically right here. This is the main part of this warm sector, and right in the dead center, that's where we're going to be really watching out for potential for some significant tornadoes, or at least some frequent tornadoes. So basically right on the border there of Oklahoma, that's where you're going to see, that's a lot better sounding at 3Z. Seeing inverted V, so still going to be seeing, basically like I said, it's going to be kind of be more of a try probability. So there's that inverted V, going to be seeing some significant winds as well. This is actually a really good HODO that actually really just basically curves to the right, and we're not seeing any back veer. So we're not seeing any veering necessarily, as well as seeing some pretty intense veering, specifically, basically I'd say within 1,700 millibars, and of course going to be seeing kind of kind of just staying pretty constant once you get to the higher levels, but really, really high amount of shear there. I mean, seeing 34 knots at 1 kilometer and then getting all the way up to the 70s as we go higher up. 2,400 K. This is actually a really good sounding. Lifted index at -8, so seeing some really good amount of instability. Storm out to Felicity as around 294. This is actually a really good sounding. This everything about this is a really good sounding for all tornado, hail, and winds. Like I said, it's going to be kind of just basically to the east of Oklahoma City's where that big threat's going to be for tornadoes and all try risk. Like I said, although Oklahoma City is still going to be in the threat for tornadoes. Um, Obviously, they're still in the 10 non-sig, but I think the better chance for actually seeing tornadoes is going to be just east of Oklahoma. I mean, look at this sounding here just east of Oklahoma City. 2,700 Cape. I mean, seeing some really good amounts of instability there. I mean, actually, this is a really good inverted V sounding. This is actually a really good all-around sounding. Seeing some decent, actually, some pretty decent lapse rates. Seeing some very intense veering here in the lower levels. Look at that shear. I mean, getting up to there around 75 knots at around 8 kilometers, seeing some decent mid-level support as well. This is a really good sounding as well. Everything about the sounding is really, really good. So, like I said, it's going to kind of be, I think the worst of this whole event is going to basically just be southeast of Oklahoma City. And then as we get towards the deeper part of the warm sector, we're going to start seeing a little bit more of this storm or this event starting to kind of gust down upscale. So we're going to start seeing some more contamination and not going to be seeing the best time. So again, the best time is going to be there. You see some really intense veer back veer, and here's a veer back veer right here. This is where they see that veer back veer. So this is basically, I'd say between 0Z and around 4Z is probably going to be the best time frame for all this significant probability threat. So let's now look at the theta E temperature here, and obviously Kelvin. So let's now look at the overall main event here, which is obviously going to be, or this time frame is going to be Sunday. So here's a look at 0Z, and there you see the very intense, or not very intense, but you can kind of see the overall apparent dry line basically kind of setting up like this. Obviously, you can kind of tell by the wind bars going basically this way. That's where you see that dry line. And when you see the wind bars kind of facing kind of southeasterlies or basically maybe southerlies, that's where you're going to be seeing that kind of really distinct difference within deviation within this overall event. As well, we're going to be seeing some pretty good advection within the system as well. Just basically in the kind of along the dry line, it's going to be kind of where we're seeing that really apparent advection, basically within the OKC metro. But here's look at 0Z again. That's where you start to see these storms spawning, these discrete modes starting to spawning. Or actually, let me do that again. Some discrete cells starting to spawn basically along OKC and just to the southwest. Going to be some really big hailers and winds. Going to be some, again, like I said, main hailers across OKC metro. But again, we still can't rule out the possibility for obviously apparent and large tornado risk for that region. Again, they're still in a 10 non-sig. But by 3Z, this is where it's going to be a lot more apparent, really a lot better. You can see a lot better rim barbs are basically facing a lot further southeast. When you start seeing those southeasterlies, that's going to be really good when you look at it standing. When you start seeing some southeasterlies on the wind bars, that's actually typically in general really good for both tornado or basically tornado specifically when you start to see those wind bars facing the southeast. But there you see that really sharp cutoff within that dry line. So not directly along that dry line. It's going to be directly, you can start seeing those discrete modes. But basically right here, this is going to be the main area, kind of deep into that warm sector. It's going to be the big area to watch out for those tornadoes. Going to be seeing some really good amount of instability there. 353 Kelvin temperatures, 354, 355. This is really, really uncommon for, obviously, this time of year. Let's look at a sounding here randomly within the deep part of the warm sector. I mean, look, this is actually a really good sounding here. I mean, this is... Wow, I actually really like this sounding. Let me see if I can actually move this really quickly on my screen. There we go. This is a really good all-around sounding 2,700 Cape. Really good inverted V. Really good lapse rates, I'd say. I mean, really good level of support. There is a little bit of a little bit of veer back veer, but really to the higher level, so it shouldn't be too big of a problem. But really good overall veering all across the sounding. This is a really good overall sounding, I'd say the least. I mean, this is actually not too shabby. Really good instability as well. I mean, there's nothing really to hate about the sounding. Like I said, it's going to be really good. I'm actually going to save that and copy that image. But like I said, it's going to be a very interesting setup, basically for areas just towards the southeast and east of Oklahoma City. So let's now get a look now at the latest 12Z GFS. Like I said, this is the first time I'm actually really looking at it. I actually saw when it was like 48 hours out or 48 hours in, but I actually don't have really a general idea what they have for Tuesday. So let's see what they actually have for Tuesday and both Sunday as well. So let's now look at basically 0Z, still seeing that really strong basically southwesterly flow, so seeing that really strong negative tilted trough. And it looks like the GFS is really trending to a really strong part there across. Let me actually move my screen a little bit further this way. It looks like they're really heading to a really strong part of that trough, specifically in the area I'm talking about, which is basically in the middle of that warm sector, basically just to the east of Oklahoma City. Because obviously Oklahoma City is like right here, and then you have like Norman right here. So I mean, it's just to the east here. So that's why I think that if there is going to be a 10% sig, I think it's going to be just towards the east of Oklahoma City. But look at that, really seeing really strong shear there, 80 knots or so from the southwesterly flow at 500 millibars. So really strong 500 millibar flow, as well as going to continue into, of course, that slight risk there, of course, across obviously portion of Tuesday, or sorry, Monday. But here's now we look at Tuesday, and there you see that really absolutely extreme, obviously, little jet, a ton, I mean, a lot stronger, obviously, than the first one we're talking about for tomorrow. Again, extreme, really amped up across portions there, across Colorado, 100 plus knots or so. Once we get to around 0Z, obviously on the overnight hours, you're gonna start seeing now around 80 years from not so kind of flowing. Obviously, it's gonna be a little bit ejecting, obviously further, a lot further west than the first trough for tomorrow. So it's gonna be obviously kind of taking that risk further west compared to tomorrow. Again, now including southwestern Nebraska as well. The reasoning for this huge shift here in the western risk and the 15% is because of this huge trend in the strength and the amped part of this trough, the kind of tip of the trough right here, or kind of the tip of this worth of the trough, kind of right here, is really pushing some really high amount of shear there. I mean, basically around 90-ish knots or so, and 500 millibar all the way up into Nebraska. And it's exactly, look at this. This is absolutely the big reason why we're seeing this kind of like this weird shape like that. This is exactly why, because of this trough. Obviously, it's going to be more of an intense dry line very close here, so that's why there's not going to be a risk into Colorado or into like any areas further westward. So it's going to stay basically the way it is, maybe slightly further northward if anything, maybe a little bit further kind of to the south, but I don't see anything too crazy shifting it once again to the west because of that dry line. Obviously, at this point, further west where the thermals would be absolutely horrible, all of the kinemax would be absolutely mental. But look at these shear values, 110 knots or so, 111 knots. This is just an absolutely crazy 500 millibar flow. Obviously, definitely very, very uncommon for this time of the year. And then here's now a look at the thermos here from the GFS. So, of course, seeing some really good thermos on the 11th. Of course, actually, no, sorry, the 10th. Sorry, the 10th. So let's go back to the 10th is tomorrow. So there you see 3Z, really favorable warm sector across the areas I'm talking about, southeast and east central portions of Oklahoma and far northern Texas. But let's now go a little bit further into now Tuesday. So Tuesday 21Z, seeing that really crazy moisture return, obviously already starting to see some mid 60 dew points as early as 21Z, as far north as Kansas. Again, seeing that really, really strong dry line kind of in place by 3Z. And that's exactly the reasoning for why we're not going to be seeing this risk probably shifting any further westward, because it's going to be really unfavorable thermos. And at this point, if it gets any closer, this cold front will probably just kind of gust the storm out, and it'll just upscale, dramatically and drastically, but really good. I mean, look at this 3Z. So you're seeing some really good thermos across. I mean, look at this. Look at Oklahoma. They're going to be seeing the main risk there for areas across Oklahoma. Like I said, like I said earlier in the video, that although the kind of the overall multi-severe weather or the multi-state outbreak for Tuesday has kind of decreased in confidence, but Oklahoma's still really ramped up. And I mean, let's just say that the GFS, the European, and the NAM are pretty aggressive for Tuesday. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys later.